So, Roy, well, firstly, welcome to ChatTalent audience. We're here to talk about onboarding. I'm lucky to have with me Roy, the co-founder of Appical. As we walk through this webinar, you'll learn more about Roy and what Appical do. But more importantly, we're here to answer the questions of the ChatTalent audience around onboarding. So we're covering off 5 key questions today that we've thought about, and we're going to deliver answers around, but actually we're going to have 15 or 20 minutes time at the end of the webinar to cover off any additional questions that any of the attendees here live in the session also want answered. If possible, pop those questions into the Q&A. Even better if you can say whether you're happy to come live on screen and ask your questions to Roy or myself. That'll be wonderful. So that's enough for me. Roy, over to you. Let's crack on with this.
Sure. So you want to get started on the questions, Alan? Or?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, perfect. Let me share my screen. Perfect. So like you mentioned, we have gathered 5 questions, and I'll list them shortly. So the first question we got in is, when do you start the onboarding process? And that's the one we'll start off with today. These questions came in mostly to Alan, like you mentioned, on email, chat. I think somebody even called you with an additional question last minute. So we're trying to answer all of them today. And question 1, when do you start the onboarding process? Well, my initial answer would be don't wait, just start. That's the easiest thing. A lot of people we talk to tend to make it a very big thing. And actually there's a lot of things that can be covered during pre and onboarding, but I guess the best advice is just to start. You can think big, but start small. There are a lot of small things that could easily help make the experience of your new hire much smoother, much more fun. And if you invested in the small, I think things will start paying off quite quickly. You will see the joy of the small things you create. And probably most of the things that you want to bring across to a new hire are things that you already have available. You probably know the most important topics you want to share. You know which hardware they will use. You know which data will come in. So creating a cool experience doesn't necessarily have to be a very big and expensive thing to create. It's usually the small things in life that makes us very happy. So I think that's definitely something I would say when somebody would ask me, like, how should I start? If you take a look at onboarding in general, we usually see a couple of important milestones. I think the most essential one for me personally is the pre-boarding phase, all the things that come before your first day. You have these people, your new hires, all hyped from the candidate experience. And they feel all excited. They saw your beautiful website. They talk to these amazing recruiters. And then suddenly there's a 3 or 4 week drop in interaction. They just have to wait until that first day. And I think this is a huge opportunity for you as an employer to communicate a lot of essential information. Give them the small things that they can learn about your history, your vision, your values, maybe the culture, like a lot of practicalities, like what should I wear on my first day? Where can I park my car? When will I get my first paycheck in? These are things new people struggle with. They are curious beings. So sharing those can have a huge impact. And it would also create the side effect that people will feel very engaged. They will maybe go to a birthday of a friend and say, well, look at this. I've got a lot of content, and they are sharing things even while I'm just starting in 2 weeks' time. And I think that can be pretty cool. The other phases that are quite important are naturally the first day. This is so essential. People are nervous. They come to the office. So you want to make sure you have all those things covered. Want to have somebody waiting for them at the front door, give them a small tour if they didn't have that during their candidate experience. And then slowly you move on into the first week, the first month, 3 months. So we always talk about pre-boarding and the 30, 60, 90 days. Those are the most essential milestones during the onboarding. And you want to cut your information along these timelines. So be very practical at first, energized before the first day, and after the first month, start sharing more in-depth information, maybe strategic things about your company. So go more complicated along your timelines. Usually when somebody asks me, do you have like a few topics that we should cover, then I usually mention these 8 things that are the most important. So if I talk about onboarding with somebody for a very small amount of time, these are the things I'd cover. Make sure new hires fell in love with your company. The first day really special, define the milestones, and give some relevant content along the way. So I think it's quite easy to start if you just start soon. I mean, don't wait too long and just get going.
And Roy, how important is this stuff? So it's all well and good me saying I believe it's important, and I can reflect on personal experiences. So I'm going to talk more about this on Thursday at Onboard Amsterdam, where I'd had terrible onboarding experience and I felt it impacted my ability to deliver, or certainly how long it took me to get to the point of being able to deliver within an organization. But that's me talking about personal experience. It's anecdotal almost. I can also say I've observed it with colleagues and friends, etc. Again, that's relatively anecdotal. Is there any kind of data or is there any studies that have been done around the importance of onboarding?
Yeah, there's a lot of research going, especially the last couple of years. You see the big global agencies doing some research on pre and onboarding, and that research tend to show that they like to focus on people leaving the company because that's an easy ROI to calculate. Like if somebody leaves within the first month, you spend this amount of money on recruiting, this amount of money on getting the things in, you spend time on onboarding the person. So I think there's a lot of focus on the financial aspect of onboarding. And like you mentioned, the other aspect, like the cultural fit, like somebody will carry this experience with themselves for the rest of their life. So that's naturally, it could be a very big hit to your brand if you don't do this the right way. You can spend thousands and thousands on a nice website, but if some people leave the company after 60 days and telling them it was well, let's say not the greatest experience, that naturally has a very big impact.
Absolutely. Okay, excellent. And are people, organisations starting to get this now and starting to realise the importance of it? And does that mean that people are starting to follow now and kind of go along with those leaders who are doing this stuff well?
I believe so. I think if you'd asked me this question 5 or 6 years ago, we found that a lot of companies didn't see this as a priority. You would hear a lot, well, we're currently focusing on automation or on feedback cycles and so on. But I think over the last 2 to 3 years, we see that this kind of became a priority for a lot of companies. Because the market it's getting harder to attract like top talent. So once you got them in, you really want to keep them in your company. So we see this topic more and more on conferences. I think a couple of weeks back in Unleash Amsterdam, it was mentioned as the top priority for HR for the upcoming 2 years.
Excellent. Okay, so it's of the moment and it's relevant, and if the big top 2% organizations are doing this stuff, eventually everyone else is going to start following if they're not already.
Yeah, you'll see that once these big organizations get going, more data comes up. I think one of the recent studies showed that having a good onboarding means that people are 54 times more productive in their first year or something.
Wow.
So yeah, the impact can be huge.
And the beauty is actually, because it isn't incredibly expensive or complicated or impossible to deliver, you don't need to wait for the big companies to say how are they doing it. You can figure this stuff out if you're a smaller company and actually start to differentiate yourself and set yourself apart from those big corps and make yourself unique and different.
Yeah, it's super easy to start. I mean, even on your first day, I mean, even if you wouldn't have resources as an HR department, making that first day a lot of fun. It's quite easy, and it's good to give it a personal touch.
Exactly. Okay, cool.
So that is actually a nice bridge to the second question you asked us, Alan. How do you personalize the process for each employee? So I think there are a lot of areas to cover regarding this question. One that I personally like a lot, and that's what we use through our software as well, but it's quite easy to implement if you use other ways, is bringing relevant content to your new hire. So this might not be as applicable if you are a small or medium enterprise, but especially the bigger companies, they have so much information to share. So you want to make sure that you get the right content to the right person. Your new hire, he only cares about relevance. So he or she is going to start within a couple of days, and they want to really know what's relevant to them. How about my office? How about the vision for my department? So one tactic we use is we try to tag the content to the new hire if we provide it digitally. So you only get the content that is relevant for your function, your location, your department, and so on. And that can also be applied to, for example, frequently asked questions. I think frequently asked questions are one of the most powerful tools you can start with. Just categorize the questions new hires usually have in your company, tag them to the relevance. So people in Japan might ask, like, what should I wear on my first day? Well, for Japan, it could be a suit. And for China, they might ask the same question, but they might have a different dress code. But this is very basic information that new hires struggle with. They feel unconfident. They have to go out there on the first day. So you want to have all these basics covered so they can focus on the more important stuff. So I definitely believe you need to tailor and personalize, but you also have to realize as a company, like the more personal you go, the more maintenance you will create at your HR department. Like if you're going to send out a personal note, which I think is one of the best things you can do, it's a manual thing to do. So if you plan that in your onboarding experience, you know that you're going to have a lot of work maintaining that. So I think it's essential to find like a good balance in making it personal, but also making it scalable. So that provides you the security you need to grow as a company. Yeah.
And I guess there's where they're using this methodology where you've almost got a matrix of team, function, location, role type, etc. You can quite quickly have what appears to be highly personalized pieces for every single individual person in the organization. So if I'm sat next to somebody who's doing a different job, their onboarding experience will be slightly different to mine in terms of the information that's provided to them. But from a central perspective of organizing it, it's not incredibly difficult or complex.
No, it's not difficult at all. I mean, I use the example from our tool, but even if you would go completely old school and say, well, I would love to print this information, you could just create a bunch of Word documents with the same kind of foldering system as this one, and just print and send the ones that are applicable to a new hire instead of sending one full PDF with all the information. I mean, nobody likes a lot of paperwork. So if you send them paperwork, just make sure it's the right one.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Excellent.
So actually talking about content, when we usually start helping customers creating content for their onboarding, they suddenly realize there's a lot to share. But we always mention that it's not beneficial to anyone to start sharing it all. So you really want to be specific about the things you want to share. For example, think about culture versus task-oriented organizations. Some of our clients really tend to focus on a cultural onboarding, so make sure somebody feels at home, understands the culture of the company, while other companies tend to focus more on tasks, so be compliant, learn about our password policy, making sure you know everything you need to know because we're ISO certified. So it's a very different approach, and this can have a huge impact on how the new hire will experience this first couple of months at your company. So these are some important decisions that you as an HR, or maybe in combination with your communications department, need to make, and it will have a huge impact on how somebody will feel.
Okay, then what's your recommendation? You go down the cultural route rather than the task route.
Naturally, because I think it's more fun.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
from my perspective, that is the best way to go about it. I mean, if somebody feels like a good fit in your company, I'm quite sure they will stay. Although for some organizations, it's not a choice to use the cultural approach, and they have to go for the task-oriented approach. But I guess that will be different for all companies a little. But I would definitely recommend using a lot of cultural things in your onboarding, because you just want to make it fun. You want to keep new hires engaged.
I think you can intersperse the tasks with the cultural stuff, can't you? If you do need those tasks completed,
yeah,
you can almost make that fun and it's so jokey or humorous. Like, look, we've given you all this good stuff about why it's amazing, but guess what? Because we are a certified organisation or a PLC, or we operate in a particular market, etc., we have to do this stuff. Sorry, but you got to do it. So go over there and just get this task completed, and then come back here for the fun stuff again.
Exactly. You want to blend it. You want to have like a perfect balance between fun and serious topics. And I guess that's up to you as a company to blend that. And depending on the type of organization you are, I imagine a law firm is not always as fun as maybe a retailer, because the content they have is just so different. But I think there's a big fun element to all types of companies, and it's up to you to find the right tone of voice, use fun images. It's really not that hard to make your content much more fun by just using a Giphy at the right moment to make people laugh. That's important.
Exactly. Okay, cool.
Another thing, before moving on to the next question, is timing. So I naturally mentioned the pre-boarding and the onboarding. I think it's essential that you share the right content at the right point in time. So you definitely want to create like this timeline for yourself, even in your digital tool, or if you send paper stuff, send some things in a different order to not overwhelm your new hires. Keep it fun and keep them curious, so they can ask for more.
One point on that, we keep obviously referring back to Appical, because that's what you know. That's how you work with your clients to help them deliver onboarding experiences. How does Appical deliver that experience? Is it via email, via text? Is it via an app? How does it actually work from an employee perspective?
Yeah, so for us, we deliver it via platform. So we are a SaaS tool. So with our tool, HR managers get access to this admin interface where they can, tag messages, content, to-do items, and so on to the new hire. And then along the way, the new hire would get an app, emails, messages, and so on along the way. So we would unlock content towards the first day and after the first day to make it a playful experience. But I definitely don't believe that our tool is the only way to do it, or even the full way to do it. I mean, I think the social element is so important. So I'm definitely a big fan of a first day gathering, or 30 days after your first day gathering. Keep that social element in. I mean, going digital is nice for scalability, but it's definitely not covering everything. I mean, it's technology, but naturally the human aspect is super important here.
I think, if we see how things like meetups have started up and how popular they are, that people want to have that time with human beings. It's all well and good doing everything online via your traditional, email messaging or social channels, etc. But actually, the value of the human contact piece, I think we need to maintain that. And people are saying it; they want human contact, especially if they're going to be working remotely. Even more so, every so often, that opportunity to kind of press the flesh and spend some time with other warm bodies, so to speak, in the same room. It's necessary for the soul, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think technology is just one way of making things a little bit easier to maintain. I mean, you have your content digitally. If you update it, it's updated for everyone. Those are all nice benefits, and it makes your organization more scalable. But all of this content could also be shared in another way. So you don't necessarily require a tool. Naturally, I definitely recommend it because that's our business. And I believe there's a huge benefit of doing it. But all of the things we mentioned could also be done in another way and be just as powerful.
Excellent. But the blended approach for me is the sensible.
Yeah, I believe that works. Definitely believe that works.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
Another question you sent to us, Alan, is how do you deal with feedback questions and support during the onboarding phase? I think that was an interesting one because naturally a lot of companies believe that HR is the department to take care of everything around onboarding. I'm actually a huge fan of including the manager. So your direct manager has such a big influence on how a new hire feels. So we invest a lot in connecting that manager to the new hire, next to connecting the new hire to the HR person. So one example is giving your managers access to an environment, or you could even do this by email, send them a letter like, hey, your new hires are coming up. These are their contact details. Make sure you reach out before the first day. I mean, not in every organization, managers are introduced to the new hires during the recruiting process. So in case you're not, it's super important that you reach out before the first day and not shake hands while the whole floor can see that this is your new team member. I mean, that's awkward, and it doesn't make the new hire feel important. I think it's awkward. So you definitely don't want to have that. I really like what Google does here. Google encourages managers to think about new employees even before they start working. So I believe Google sends their managers an email, I think 3 or 4 days before the new hire starts, and they say, well, this and this person starts on Monday. Please think about their role and responsibilities. Please find them a peer or a buddy to mentor them the coming months. Introduce a new hire to the rest of the team. Connect them through LinkedIn. Check in with them. Create an open dialogue, and so on. So they just send these topics to the manager, and their data showed that by just sending this message to the manager and not making it an obligation to follow up, they have like a huge return on investment from that manager, because he or she in the weekend starts thinking like, oh yeah, wait, Monday I got this new person, I need to take care of a few small things. That makes a huge difference, because it happens so much that people arrive at Monday morning and they think, oh no, I have a new person coming in at 9 o'clock. I should, I don't know, get all the hardware ready, bring it to their desk. Well, you know, the last minute panic. So just by informing, this is an easy thing to cover. So yeah,
I think that's so important, because I think you've got hiring managers or line managers who sit in kind of three camps. You've got a relatively small percentage who are naturally good at this stuff, know how to do it, want to do it, and do it. Yeah. You've got a small percentage at the other end who know how to do it but don't care and never will. But then you've actually got a massive chunk of people right in the middle who want to do really well by their new employees but don't necessarily know what the things are they should be doing, or maybe just need a bit of prompting and a bit of poking and prodding and pointing in the right direction to help them with that stuff. And sometimes it's a case of time. They forget. It's not intentional. They just get so busy and caught up in the day-to-day that they don't get the opportunity to do it. Sometimes it's just literally going, these are the 5 things you need to do. They'll each take 2 or 3 minutes, but actually the upside of doing them and the benefits of doing them will far outweigh those 10, 15 minutes it's taking you to do them.
Yeah, so I think there's huge potential, and I think it's one of the areas, like after you've done your pre-boarding right as a company, this is one area you can like easily create a lot of success in. Just include the managers in communication, and then maybe start thinking about buddies or coaches, mentors, whatever. Include all stakeholders along the way.
And I'm just actually going to ask you a question that's just quickly come in from Audra, because it's quite relevant for the now. How do you know this stuff's working? So how do you kind of measure things where you look at where you started and where you finished once you've started to make these changes and these improvements?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Like naturally, once we talking from a personal perspective, once we get to a customer, We usually analyze like what's the current situation, how do managers connect, how is feedback managed, like do you even ask feedback along the way, and maybe that's even a good trigger to show the next slide, because this is one of the ways we measure it. Like I think it's so important that you ask your new hires a lot of feedback along the way. For example, this is a rating page where new hires can rate on certain topics. Naturally, you don't always have this data from before using a digital tool like this one, but I guess everybody has kind of an expectation of how it currently is and how you could improve it. And this helps you get actual data, like did a new person feel welcome? Did they connect to the team? Did they feel that the manager made them feel welcome? Or you can think of tons of questions that could be relevant. And I think there are a lot of ways to measure that. I mean, this is a closed question format, but we also promote like open question format. So ask people about taking a picture with other team members. So you really want to promote that interaction. And I think by doing that in a digital way, it allows you to gather some data and prove your point that it works.
Exactly. You could do all of this even without being involved with you guys. It's a relatively simple survey, isn't it? That you could look at a mixture of quantitative and qualitative type analysis. And then once you put in place your onboarding program, whatever that looks like, however you deliver it, you could look at then measuring a similar group of people. Clearly, you've got to measure them at the same point in time you measured the initial audience, whether they're new employees, their employees are a month in, 3 months in, 6 months in. But as long as they're of a similar nature and a similar type, you can see whether the changes you put in place are actually having an impact and in a positive way. Hopefully always a positive way, but how much?
Hopefully. And I think there are so many tools out there to ask these questions. I mean, you could even ask them by email if you don't have any resources. And they have a huge impact, and especially on the long term, like if you want to go to the next level, you could even compare this to offboarding data, like how many people left and did that people get the new onboarding experience or the old onboarding experience. You need some resources or some data scientists to connect the dots, but I'm quite sure you can prove that people with a good onboarding experience stay longer, and I think the communication element is very important here.
What about how important is getting feedback from hiring managers as well in terms of how engaged they are with the kind of onboarding process?
I think super important. I mean, they naturally have an essential role, and I think for them, the most important part is that the new hire is a fit. I mean, they created an extra job or they required an extra specialist in their team. So the whole recruitment department put a lot of effort in getting that person into the company. And now they have this extra resource in their team. So I think it's essential that they feel happy about this whole experience. I mean, they are, in the end, the person benefiting from the extra person in the team. So I think it's very important that the manager is not only happy about the new hire itself, but also the process. I mean, usually managers are very busy, so they don't want to spend a lot of time on doing quick check-ins. So if you can digitalize this way of going about it, I think that's a huge win.
Exactly. Cool. Okay. Cheers.
And I found this one as well. I think everybody has seen these ones on LinkedIn. I think it's good. So I think providing your new hire with the necessary tooling on the first day. I've seen tons of examples where people got their new laptop on day 3 and they found themselves 2 days just looking around or using an old borrowed computer. But providing the necessary tooling will cause definitely a warm feeling of welcome. And the bonus here is that it's very likely that your new hire will feel super excited and maybe even post something on LinkedIn, which I think is very good and free exposure for your brand, because you need to buy a lot of these things anyway. So I think this is definitely an easy win. Yeah.
It's just some simple stuff. I saw one guy who literally posted a much less interesting picture than this of screen, laptop, phone. And he was super excited that on his first day he had those things, because in every other organization he joined, he hadn't. And I'm like, on one hand, though, like, that is the most boring picture I've ever seen. On the other, I was crying inside. This poor guy was so delighted to get something that was so basic, really, in the grand scheme of things. It's really, this kind of minimum stuff, isn't it? And the fact that people are actually posting this out, it shows you how few organizations get it right.
I agree. And I mean, this is why, like, I think a lot of people at least once experienced the bad onboarding, and then these little things like having all this stuff on your desk makes it so much fun. I mean, and there are tons of different examples. I mean, this is hardware, this is some swag. I see a cap, I see a sweater, but I've also heard examples of people, salespeople getting the lease car, and there was a flower bouquet on top of the lease car, like with a card from the manager saying thank you for coming into our team. And I mean, these small things make a big difference to people.
Yeah, just little touches, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. On to the next question: how to promote communication in the workplace. Well, I think we briefly mentioned it before. I think what's super important here is that as HR and as a manager, you need to lead by example. So be accessible, be proactive, make sure to reach out to the new hire often enough that they feel like they don't have to reach out. I think that's a bad thing if you're a new hire, and give your team like the tools to communicate, and give them the information, like naturally you expect managers to have this knowledge, but not all managers do, but give them the information like what are the small things that they can do to make a difference. So I mentioned before, connect with your new hire on LinkedIn, introduce them to the team, introduce them to key people, inform the team that they're coming on this day. So everybody is aware, and I think that will open up the dialogue to also start interacting with the new hire and make people feel welcome very quickly.
And how important do you think it is that onboarding is a team effort? So it's not just the responsibility of HR or somebody who looks after the back end of the recruitment process or the hiring manager, but actually it's the kind of responsibility of the whole business. And how can more people get involved, particularly things like mentoring and buddying, etc.?
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the most important things. I mean, in the end, it's not the HR manager that you're going to work with. It's usually not the manager that you're going to work with on a daily basis, but it's the team. So I think it's an essential task for HR to make sure that the team is aware. I mean, the first person naturally to include is the manager. But then if this new hire comes into the office, you will be sitting at a desk next to the rest of the employees, maybe not even close to the managers. So getting them involved, making them aware of the whole process is super important. And I think you'll have a whole different welcome if the whole office knows you're coming in, or that they'll be surprised like, oh, Alan starts working with us today. Like, oh, that's nice. When did he sign his contract? What is his position? I mean, it's such a different vibe that people will get when they get into your office. So it's an easy win. This is definitely something to easily roll out, but with a big impact.
I think just going back to doing stuff before the person joins, I heard of one guy who joined an organization, and literally about 2 weeks before he was due to join, he had something like 10, 15 messages on LinkedIn from future colleagues, all very excited about the fact he was going to be joining the business, connecting with him, starting to share stuff about their business, about their industry, etc. And he was just overawed by that kind of appreciation and that kind of welcoming approach.
I'm sure he felt like a rock star.
Yeah, absolutely. It was it wasn't a senior role either. It wasn't people kind of buttering him up because he was going to be their boss, or it was a senior hire. It was relatively junior, relatively early career. But it just meant that he went into that organization just absolutely full of energy and full of life, and kind of felt like he was already part of the team, because he'd had a couple of weeks of just the odd message here and there, a welcome note, simple little stuff again.
And I think that's a perfect example that you don't need to spend a lot of money to make people feel very welcome. I mean, asking your team to connect with somebody is for free, and it has such a big impact. I mean, I imagine this guy, he was super excited. I mean, it's such a nice feeling when you know there's this whole team waiting for you, and that they're all excited that you will join. I mean, that's the world of difference.
Absolutely. Okay, cool.
And naturally, another one I wanted to mention is that you want to naturally introduce the team. So give them the contact details, but that's ground we mostly covered. The last question that you shared with us is, when would you consider an onboarding program to be successful? It's a tricky question because naturally it depends on what your goals were when you started. We love to use the 4 C's of onboarding. So if we measure a successful onboarding program, we always try to look at compliance, clarification, connection, and culture. So these are 4 topics that you want to nail as a company to create like a cool onboarding. Compliance in general is the lowest level and includes teaching employees like basic legal and policy related rules and regulations. So think about password policy, how should you lock your stuff at the office, lock down your computer, all the basics.
The exciting stuff.
The exciting stuff. So this is what you want to blend in with the cool stuff like culture. Culture is it's quite broad naturally. It's providing employees with a sense of organizational norms, I would say, both formal and informal, like how should you behave within our company, what are our values, but also stuff like we love to do drinks on Friday afternoon. So give people like a small touch of how the culture works. If you can bring that across in your onboarding, that's super important. Clarification, make sure that the new hire understands their job. I mean, not everybody has this easy job title that totally describes what you're doing, especially larger corporates. They have tons of seniority levels, tons of specialists with maybe technical job names. So you want to make sure that the new hire at least understands what their job is and what is expected from that job and how they contribute. And the last one is the one we just discussed, is naturally connecting. So make sure people feel welcome and they are connected into the company networks.
Perfect. And is there, are there any kind of pointers you want to give to people in terms of what they want to be doing with onboarding? Any kind of like a checklist, or how do you kick this off? And
I'm glad you asked.
I don't like it. And I hadn't seen this slide, so yeah, somehow I've got lucky there.
Yeah, lucky you. No, so definitely this is like, if there's anything I would love people to take from this webinar is take this checklist, take a screenshot or check out the recording, but this is like an easy to use checklist for your new hire for the first day. If there's anything you could do, and if you have nothing in place, these would be the things I do. Most of it is not expensive. It's kind of like how I would organize a first day if I would be more onboarding a small group of people, smart and small. Then I think this is a great checklist, and you can see checklist item 8 is the welcome gift. Like that's the package picture. It's a very easy win, and yeah, I think these are the basics.
Okay, so it's a good starting point for anybody who's starting on their own kind of onboarding journey. And everybody will get copies of the slide deck, so we'll shoot that around to you, where me and Roy will put our heads together about any other decent, good content that you might want to look at, to give you that starting point if you're starting out on onboarding, or even if you're looking at modifying what you're doing. I know we were going to do questions, but we've actually got a minute to go. So given the fact I've fielded some of those questions as we've gone along, most of the questions I asked you, Roy, were actually from the audience anyway. They were coming through
That's great.
Q&A in the chat. So I think we've covered off some really good ground. And I'm always mindful that people have got a certain amount of time set aside for this stuff. So thank you so much for your time, Roy. Really appreciated it.
Thank you for having me.
Seeing you in a couple of days' time on stage at Onboard Amsterdam. Really looking forward to learning more about onboarding myself. And you're going to have, it's approaching something like 850 delegates there, is that right?
Yeah, I think I just checked the list tomorrow and we're approaching 1,000. So it's going to be super exciting. Yeah.
So you're going to have to find more seats then. Because I know the target is 850.
We'll find some more seats. That'll be cool. Yeah, very much looking forward.
A great event. Anybody here who's going to be attending it, hook up with us both. We'll be happy to chat to you about onboarding all day long. Again, Roy, thanks for your time putting this together. Audience, thanks for coming along. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next ChatTalent webinar. Cheers.
Cheers.